Did you choose the names of the characters because, like, the name meant a certain thing, or just because, oh, I like that name, let's use it?
Both. Just a couple of examples. Hannah, I just like the name. And then there are other names I chose deliberately because they had special meaning for me. Gordon, the Gordon sisters, in the second book, who are these just amazing, wonderfully diverse group, including outspoken Minor and, and the really quiet Mary and so on. I took the name Gordon, I thought, in homage to the fact that, in Scotland, allegedly I'm part of Clan Gordon. It's a bit dubious, but never mind. But I actually think now I probably took it from Gordon Street, which is down the street from me here in South Georgia. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Names. The only names that I'm having to think about this now. The only names that I think I really sort of had to make up and didn't just lift out of a phone book or something were Balesworth, which is the town in England that the children keep finding themselves drawn back to in the series, and Snipesville, the town in Georgia in which they live. And Snipesville is heavily based on Statesboro, Georgia, which is where I live. Sorry, Statesboro, sorry. But I didn't want to call it Statesboro, partly because I wanted to mess with it, and partly because I didn't want to upset people. So I came up with the name Snipesville, only to find out that, in fact, there is a Snipesville, Georgia. So I just solved that problem by apologizing to them in the back of the book. I was like, I'm so not changing it. And Balesworth was just, had to come up with the name of a place in Hertfordshire, again, based on a real place, but I wanted to mess with it. So Worth is a common suffix on a place name in Hertfordshire. So I figured, I just went through all the possible worths and came up with Balesworth, and there wasn't a Balesworth, so there you are.
Great. How long did you work on the book from the first idea to having it actually be published?
I think it was about a year for the first book, 2 years for the second, and I'm working on the third, and it's looking to take me 3 years now. I don't write full-time. I no longer have a day job. I resigned from the university 3 years ago. But I also do school. There's the history behind one of the books, rather than just talking, as I am now, endlessly about myself. I really prefer to talk about the history. And so I do that, and then during the summers, I do children's history camps, I do performances at libraries, and really just trying, the books are just one part of a larger thing I'm trying to do, which is to rescue history from the clutches of utter boredom. I think so many history programs for kids, really, I'm going to risk ticking people off here, but too bad, are really pretty awful. And the curriculum for kids is a train wreck in the schools. It's dreadful. And so this is like my one-woman mission now for the rest of my active life, to try to, through everything I do, to try to bring good, fun, thought-provoking, interesting history to kids. Mm-hmm. So it takes me a while to write. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be 3 years by the time I'm finished with this third one. So.
How many times do you self-edit before you sent it to, or how to publisher edit?
How many times do I self-edit? Wow. I lose count. I am relentless, and I'm still not good enough. I mean, I think I went through the first book about 50 times, and even now I'm to the point of looking at it going, oh, that sentence, and I really would love to do a second edition of the first book and just sort of tidy some things up that really bug me. So I am relentless. I don't think anyone should ever write a first draft and say, oh, aren't I clever? I thought my book sucked. And I wrote it for my own amusement. Seriously, Megan. And then a friend of mine persuaded me to let her look at the first draft, and I showed it to her and a couple of other historian friends who I could trust to say it sucked. If it sucked, they were going to tell me it sucked. And to my pleased astonishment, they kept going on about how great it was, and I actually did not believe them. I would not believe anybody that my book was good, even if they were critical of it, until a woman who is now a published and wonderful young adult author called Tara McFoy. She has worked in publishing. At the time I met her, she was manager of a wonderful bookstore called the Little Shop of Stories in Atlanta. And when she said she loved it and she wanted her kids in her kids' book club at the bookstore to read it, that's when I had my first inkling that my book didn't suck. So, I've actually, since Tara got her hands on it, I've actually felt a whole lot better about what I'm doing. So it goes through a lot of me reading it. I have a focus group made up of just anybody, particularly kids, young people, I should say, who is willing to read and give me an honest feedback. I'm not interested in being told how wonderful it is. I want to know what is wrong with it so that I can do my best to fix it.
How many publishers did you send it to?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. You've just asked me directly, point blank, a question that I've been avoiding for years, and I'll tell you why. When I finished the first draft, I almost immediately afterwards had a major illness out of the blue. Had a blood clot and went to my lung, nearly killed me. And so I was sitting in the hospital editing this book, which really kept me going. And, it changes your perspective on life when something like that happens. You suddenly realize, oh, I might not live to be 96 and be hitting people with my stick. I might actually, drop dead tomorrow. And I really did not have huge ambitions for this book. I think I probably have more ambitions for the book series now because I'm so excited at how people have responded to it. But at the time, I just wanted to be able to get my friends to read it, my friends' friends, and have a little ego trip and be done with it. And so I know too much about publishing. I know that I don't know anybody in New York. I don't know any 20-somethings dressed in black. I don't have great contacts. I knew that my chances of getting published were few and far between. I wasn't writing about zombies or vampires. I was not someone who was known. I didn't have a platform. I wasn't a celebrity. And I just thought, do I really want to go through this? Do I want to go through getting an agent, trying to get a publisher, when I know that I could spend years that I may not have beating my head against the wall? And finally, the answer to that was no. So to say I set up my own publishing company sounds much grander than I self-published, and this is the point at which a lot of your readers are going to switch off YouTube and say, okay, I'm done with this woman now because she's not real. And I can understand that. There's an awful lot of really bad self-published books out there. Mm-hmm. I think my books would be better if they had gone through big publishing houses with their editors and all the rest of it. And all that said, am I glad I self-published it? Opened my own publishing house. Yes, I'm very glad. And that's because I've had thousands of people reading my books. And I might still be waiting for some, agent somewhere to pick it up and say, oh, this doesn't suck. And it's made me very, very, very happy. So I make no money, but then again, I don't think authors generally do make money unless they're, New York Times bestsellers. What I do have is the incredible satisfaction of getting fan mail from all over the world. And of writing for an audience. And that's all I ever really wanted to do.
When you wrote the first book, did you know that you would write more in the series?
Well, I can't lie because I put book 1 in big letters on the front cover. And one time I was talking to a book club and a gentleman was there with his daughter. And he said, why did you put book 1 on the cover? And I said, don't people, normally do that? He said, no. And I said, thinking rapidly, well, it was to make sure that I wrote another one. And it kind of was. It was... it was just, I already was thinking about the second one. And I thought, if this book disappears and nobody ever reads it and I wind up with, a garage full of unsold copies, it doesn't matter anyway, because no one will have heard of it. So fine, it doesn't matter if I make an idiot of myself, because who will hear? Mm-hmm. So I always did want to make it a series. I have 5 books in the series. I am working on the 3rd. I have a very good idea of what the 4th and 5th are going to look like. And when they're done, I have another series that I want to... Well, no, that's a lie. I have another book that I want to write that I might even, if I haven't dropped dead, try to get conventionally published, because, you know, it actually might even do it. But to be honest with you, publishers, it's nothing personal, but I've never liked any of you. I've met a lot of you. I've never liked one I liked. I've never met one I liked. I mean, you're all kind of snobby, and I just don't deal well with that. So maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I'm very excited about it. I'm not going to curse it, Megan, by telling you what it's about. But let's just say it's not about history, much to my astonishment. It is, however, about Scotland, which I visit every year. My parents live there. I was born there. I grew up in England, which is how come I have this English accent. But I'm basically a Scot at heart. So that's kind of the plan. But yeah, and the Snipesville Chronicles, I just keep writing them. And whoever's going to read them reads them. And I will tell you now that if you're a fan of my books, then you are part of a small but extremely devoted group of very smart people. You know, I'm just so happy to have inspired this kind of response from people, and people I do not know. So it's long ago ceased to be just my friends who read it. That was at the beginning, and now it's just kind of amazing to me, the range and the enthusiasm of people who pick up my books. I'm very grateful. So that's me salaaming to you. Thank you.
Okay, and last question. Which of your characters do you think you're most like? You know, I saw that question on your list. I was like, oh God, don't ask me that, because I all of them, or you know, so many of my characters have a bit of me in them, just at different points in my life. You know, I deny absolutely, like all my young female readers, that I have any of Hannah in me, because Hannah's like, you know, and I don't think I was ever like that. But my mother says otherwise, so who am I to argue? Mrs. D, I was strongly influenced by the woman who inspired Mrs. D, so I like to think that I can be Mrs. D. You know, sometimes when I get really annoyed with children, I take my glasses off and I just give them the stare, and you know, and generally try to frighten them. But to be honest, I don't think I'm ever going to be quite as amazing as she was. So a little bit of Brandon when I'm in my more sensible mood. You know, really, the characters I don't have much in common with are my villains, and I don't have a lot of villains in my books. I probably should have more. My son says I need more villains. But certainly, you know, the villains that I do have, I just give me the shudders, because they are clearly drawn from people I've known. You know, when you work at a university, it's fine to go as a student, but when you work in one, it can be a vicious place. So I had a lot of villains to draw on, which was, you know, in retrospect, maybe a good thing. It didn't feel like that when I was actually dealing with the real people. So I hope that answers your question. Yep. Well, thanks for the interview.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for thinking of me. I really appreciate it.